Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. If my audio is good, because I don't have my headphones in. I usually don't need them here, but let's see. Actually, breaks out the noise from outside. It kind of helps that. Maybe that'll be better. How's everybody doing? Anybody in the chat want to see if you can hear me loud and clear? Actually working on this. I just had a chat with Jonathan Peugeot that I'm working on getting uploaded, and it was really a great chat. I think you guys will like it. Still working on getting that uploaded here. Hello, Marshall. What's up? Lardoff, good. How are you guys? Thanks for chiming in here. I got a little bit of found time here, so I got, maybe an hour of some time that I usually don't have, and I just completed a conversation with Jonathan, and I figured I'd come on and see if you guys wanted to talk about being. If anybody's got any questions or wants to put out a category in terms of being to discuss. In the meantime, I can read a little bit from Martin Heidegger's The Contributions to Philosophy of the Event. Again, it's his later work. And I have a video doing how I read up to this chapter. It's entitled The Prospect, up to this section 33. And the way that the book is broken up is there's little sections that are numbered throughout the book with topics. I don't know if you guys can see that, which is actually great because you can come and drop right in and kind of get into the heart of the matter of the question of the being of beings, right? What is being answered? What is being questioned here? Why are we talking about when we talk about being? And it's important. I wish he didn't do it this way, actually. So there's the conventional term being that we know, B-E-I-N-G. And he has another spelling of this term to reflect a more fundamental ontological being that is yet to be named, and that is spelled B-E-Y-N-G. So when I do some of this reading, I will just add the Y if I'm talking about this more originary question of being that we're looking to elucidate and articulate here versus the B-E-I-N-G, traditional spelling. And I want more people to think about this question, and it's the question of the meaning of being, which was what, again, inaugurated philosophy as such. It was a sort of revelation into the human mind, into human consciousness at the time of the pre-Socratics, when all of a sudden it dawned on them the question of what is being. And Heidegger says that Dasein, the human beings, are unique from other creatures because of this central question of what is the meaning of being, right? And Heidegger says that in very complex ways. He talks through how there was an initial miscalculation, a very minor miscalculation in defining and identifying being with beings. So being is a category that all beings share, right? And that eventually led to Plato's ideals in the forms, right? And then the truth is that which coherently represents and refers to these ideal forms. So that is the initial miscalculation, Heidegger says, through Plato, that inaugurated this degeneration of being, of the thinking of being, from the pre-Socratics up into Nietzsche. And then Nietzsche was able to really intuit and articulate this, and ultimately led to this nihilism at the heart of modernity and post-modernity. So I wonder what Heidegger would say about our time now. That would be a very interesting discussion to have. With being in the relationship to being one with God, i.e. Jesus, prayer, John 17. Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm an Orthodox Christian, right? So a lot of times when I'm studying Heidegger, especially from the Orthodox, tradition, the Church Fathers, there's so much that maps on to these questions that are being asked about the being of beings and about being as such and about man's relationship to the world through Dasein. I try to keep them separate. I try to not do that when I'm reading, right? I will definitely explore it, and I love to do so, but I'm trying to keep all categories out of, I'm trying to stay out of all of the categories that I'm conditioned in. It doesn't mean that I don't believe in them, whatever it means. I'm trying to enter into this question of being, a more originary question of being, which is very hard to do because your mind automatically slips on and hangs on to something. But I think there is a lot to be said there that I think hasn't been explored enough, and I think that is very fruitful. That's something that I'm attempting to do as well. But in this particular reading, I'm not looking to kind of combine the two, if that makes sense. Sorry. Konstantinos says, greetings from Norway, listening after a difficult day at work. Thank you, sir, for your work. Thank you. I appreciate you you listening as well. I'm glad you're off of work and you can relax and enjoy your weekend. See, Varsity Bookworm, hey, how's it going? He says, the pre-Socratics talked about becoming, Heraclitus, yes, but is there a specific example of an ancient Greek philosopher talking about being? Maybe I missed it. I mean, it's not it's what we're talking about here is not the explicit study of being. That is later down the chain of philosophy, right? The being that is being studied here, right, is once you name it, a being, and start studying being from the standpoint of the being of beings. So the philosophical study, and this is Heidegger's critique of being, was already covered over, was already conceived being as such. And being became this shared quality amongst the beings. And then from that shared quality, then it is projected back onto being. So it's a part of being, but it's not it's not more in line with the more originary event or agnus of being in the first beginning. So what we're doing and Heidegger's doing, is searching for another beginning, a new beginning. And the way to do that is to shed all of the previous, not completely, but shed all of the conceptual resources and the framework that we're inculcated in order to ask the question of the meaning of being in a more originary way. But that's not to say that the history of metaphysics, the history of European philosophy, has within it a phenomenon of being. It is very a meaningful, significant thing, right? So you don't want to dismiss it, right? So there's that juxtaposition there as well. But there are, Aristotle talked about being, and that's a little bit later down the road, right? Initially the pre-Socratics, Heraclitus and Democritus, and they were looking. It's interesting. I just thought about this. That what were they exploring? They were exploring something like these fundamental elemental forces, right? Fire, water, earth. What is the nature of reality? Does it ebb and flow? So it's more of this, semi-pagan or pagan way of exploring being, because I think being was shining forth in the pagan world as well. And I think it was picked up by the pre-Socratic philosophers, and they were talking about, all is fire, all is flux, all is water, all is air. All right. So it's an interesting thing to think about. So the way that being dawned itself onto these pre-philosophical and philosophical people at that time, right, was entering their consciousness as these kind of forces, as these elemental forces. And I think there's a spiritual element, an interesting or a compelling argument to explore the spiritual elements of fire, water, earth, metal. But it should be done not from a pagan perspective, if that makes sense. There's been plenty of that done. But anyhow, let me see if there's any more questions here. Pano, what's up? How be you, boy? I'd be great. I hope you guys are great too. I'm about as great, as I could be. I had the day off. Actually, I'm working from home, so I got about an hour here. So I'm looking for that eternal well-being that St. Maximus is offering to us, the eternal well-being. Let's see here. Is being accepting in part? I don't know exactly what you mean there. So ever being, St. Maximus. You just presupposed my my comment, Pano. Ever being, ever ill being, ever well-being. Yeah. Farsi Bookworm, that makes sense. Would you say ancient philosophers were talking about being, but use different words, concepts, etc.? That's what I'm taking from that. And good to see you. Good to hear from you. Thank you. So ancient philosophers were talking about being, but used different words, concepts. I think that being, as such, was categorized and conceptualized in ways where the ancient Greek philosophers or the ancient philosophers were closer to the more originary revelation of being, but that the conceptual framework that went down from the pre-Socratics, the Socratics, ultimately down into modernity here, where we're talking about the subject, right? That there's been a degradation in this partial revelation of being through beings. So earlier on, there we're talking about being using different words. They were intuiting or grasping what was being revealed to them through this philosophical way of thinking. So there was no philosophy. I mean, in the way that we think of it, there was, why did philosophy come about at that time, and through these people? Now, there's been other, philosophical kind of civilizations, but in this specific instantiation of the logos manifesting itself, and I see this as at the same time, right? We had the logos manifest itself in different ways in different people, especially prior to the logos becoming made flesh in Jesus Christ. There is intuitions, manifestations, explorations of the logos, I think, at different levels. And I think the beginning of philosophy is another example of that. So that's why I think it's worthwhile to at least wrestle with this idea of the question of being. Heidegger's question of the question of being with the why. Remember, so I think that's an interesting thing. See, Rob says, is being accepting, meaning acceptance of the state of things, in part meaning is a part of being accepted what is. Yeah, I would say that's part of it, but part of it is also, so there's a accepting, or let's say a revealing part. There's also a concealing part. So it's this simultaneous manifestation of a revealing and a concealing. So I think in that, and maybe some subcategories of, I think that's another question that is for the being of beings, right? That's something that we grapple with, in group or out group, periphery, center, periphery, right? And I don't know if that's where you were going, but I think that exploring metaphysics, exploring phenomena philosophically in terms of these categories, even physics. So physics is physics eventually was born out of this original flash of being, but physics is a degradation. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's incomplete. And through physics and through chemistry, through now modern science, we've built a world, and technology is a manifestation, is an outgrowth of this miscalculative degeneration of being from the start of Western metaphysics or Western philosophy. I think that our relationship to techne, human beings' relationship to techne, was perverted. If you look at the Enochian literature, I think there's a lot there it's bearing fruit now. And as an aside, Alexander Dugin has this concept of this. What was it now? I just lost it. Oh yeah, the transpositionality between mythos and logos. The transpositional. So the transposition, kind of, you can think of it in terms of in genetic chemistry. In genetics, you have the transposition of protons through amino acids through the function of the DNA. Right. So this philosophical concept of transposition is there's a transpositionality between mythos and logos, between things that we consider as real and factual and objective, and things that we consider mythical. There's a transpositional relationship to both of those categories. Right. So the mythical can become more real, and the real can become, more mythical. And I think that's part of this mechanism of revealing, concealing. Right. And I think, so the relationship to human beings in the world with technology, I think, and Heidegger would say, is a result of this ever increasing miscalculation, this misappropriation of being. Right. Calculative thinking, quantity, all of these things that comprise the metaphysics of our world. They're not wrong per se or in themselves, but the way that they are, put in the hierarchy, that's the problem. The way that they are used as in framing method, the way that we see the world as a resource to be mined and exploited, essentially, is the problem. So, rambling a bit here. Thank you for the clarification. I agree. It's a very interesting topic to explore. Thank you. Pano says Parmenides talked about being Bart. Yep, that's right. That's right. The categories are a funny thing. Yes, they are. It's hard to extricate yourself from them if you can, even, without going into a mystical experience, right? Telos Bound. Hey, what's up, my brother? Good point about philosophy emerging at a specific point in history due to the role of revealing logos. Yeah, that seems about right to me. So Telos, my cousin and I are working on a video showing that the three patriarchs who prefigured the Mosaic covenant, Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, parallel Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to talk to you about that sometimes, actually. So Dugan has this idea of the logi, right? There are three logi that in every civilization that he has studied in his, he's got a 28 volume project called Noomachia, which means Wars of the Mind. And these each book is very long, and there's 28 volumes. And he says that 28 volumes can be but a mere table of contents for a much broader work. And the work is essentially exploring the nous. It's exploring, exploring civilizations on their own right, without imposing any kind of Western or Russian or Orthodox or whatever it may be, kind of value on it. The way he does that is to, he has a concept called philosophical phenomenology. So phenomenology is a branch of philosophy that most are familiar with, and it's about exploring the kind of pre-conceptual world, our intentions, and the way that human beings are in the world. But Dugan says we need to do a phenomenology of philosophy. So not phenomenological philosophy, right? But a phenomenology of philosophy. So the way you do that is you're exploring the different philosophers in different time periods and the different concepts that they were, bringing to light. It's important to, implant yourself is to have something called philosophical empathy, where you're not going and juxtaposing, you're saying, oh, my idea is better than his because of the progress that we've gone under. It's about going back in with humility and exploring the philosophical landscape for Plato, for instance, or Socrates, based on what was happening at that time. So when you're thinking and talking about concepts like eternity, right, we need to think of eternity as Plato was thinking of eternity, not as from our perspective.